Hey everyone, Ben here. Doing this recording actually on site in Hong Kong. So I'm at the Ignite Partners Conference. Started off really well. Already met some new people, which is great. I'm running into some existing friends, which is even better. So whilst I was here, I should also say I'm at the Oz Microcaps Conference. So if you can't get here in Hong Kong this week, I'll also be in Melbourne next week for 2 days at the Australian Microcaps Conference. But getting in front of people is probably the most valuable thing you can do. Pitching one-on-one is a fantastic way of telling a story, building a rapport, understanding the investor's queries, um, driving that connection deeper. And in traditional marketing style, getting a higher share of time and attention typically leads, especially on an average, leads to a higher share of wallet. So the more face time you can get with people, the better. The issue with that is it's expensive time, right? So it's extremely expensive to sit there half an hour or an hour one-on-one with people. It works with people with large check sizes, and typically you have that kind of consistent time cost, but a lowering of value. So you got a diminishing return on that value, diminishing return on that time, the sort of deeper you get into your cap table or investor size. So previously on this email, we've spoken about webinars and using them as a way to scale that connection. And what I wanted to go through is kind of three levels with this. So when I talk to a lot of companies and IR people, most stuff that you do, there's really kind of a base level, next step up, and then a real commitment. And it's the same with webinars. So I've got here three different companies that all use webinars quite differently to connect, or have used them quite differently to connect. And I want to take you through each of them. So first is Airtasker. If you're Australian based, you know who Airtasker is. They're a great local tech example. And what they did, if we just have a look at this, um, they obviously launched with us in the end of August, and then they announced their results. So using your financial year results as a way of driving attention to your website, a way of capturing investor information and interest is great. And those links go everywhere. So ASX release goes on every possible thing from Bloomberg down to hot copper, right? And everywhere in between. And so as we follow this, we can see that if we look at the ASX announcement announcing the release of their results, so this came out on the Wednesday at about midday, so 24 hours beforehand, and you can participate here. Now, the great thing with these links is that they live forever. So if we click on it now, it takes us to Airtasker's website and we can watch their presentation. So again, we're seeing Tim here, very broad based. You get ASX distribution, which is fantastic. People come and they get to watch it. Obviously, on your website is even nicer, but it's a really neat way of drawing people in from across the investing landscape, regardless of where they sit on the cap table, where they sit geographically, and where they sit in the investor life cycle. So this is what I call level one, right? Most companies use a webinar to talk about their financial results. So this is a little bit of a smarter way, obviously, of doing it, but kind of that level one balance. Level two is using that same technology and that same reach, but more consistently. So this is a company called Cogstate. If you don't know Cogstate, Brad runs it based in Melbourne. They've been on a really good run. They're a really good company to get to know, and both from a business, but also how they interact with the market is really interesting. They've started a webinar series where, whilst they did their full year results, they've also done a couple of months apart, a couple of more deep dives into the business. So the way I would want you to think about this is most of your road shows would result in 2 or 3 of the same group of 6 questions being asked, right? In that investor queries really overlap quite a bit. And so the point of this is when you've got those overlaps, the thing to remember is you're solving it one-on-one, but how do you solve that for everyone else? So here's a really good example. They're using the same tech, you get the same reach of the ASX. This is an hour-long webinar, right? So this is quite that next level of commitment. And this is a deep dive into the business. So if you think about it, I've got 6 questions that get asked very consistently. What if I did a half an hour or an hour-long webinar on each of those 6 questions? That becomes a year of content, so every like 2 months. There's no commitment to do more than that. You can reuse the information like this, it's on their website the whole time. And that's really that level 2, right? So you go from doing a webinar twice a year to doing a webinar 6 to 8 times a year, being those original 2 financial year, like full year and half year, and the sort of 6 questions. But there's no ongoing commitment to keep doing that. It's kind of we're doing this to address those 6 questions and then moving on. So that's what I'd call level 2 webinar use. The benefit here is you still get that ASX distribution. There is obviously extra time, but you are only talking about the things that you already know a lot about. Level 3 is something I'm going to use. There's a ring starting. So sorry if that's coming through. As I said, I'm on site. But level 3 is a bigger commitment. So this is Coda Minerals. They're as you can see, a copper provider, a copper explorer, I should say. And they started doing something where they could tell when they were talking to investors that they were using terminology as a copper explorer that an average investor didn't understand, right? So what they thought is, why don't we spend 20 minutes a month, talk about things we already know a lot about, and drive people to that content, create a great backlog of content, and through that, we actually really start to build a lot at scale, build a lot of trust and awareness amongst our investor base and potential investors. So they did that. They call it the Codcast, which is great, instead of their podcast. And you can see here that they're up to episode 28. And they've been doing it for a while, obviously. And it's been going really, really well. So in this way, they're really driving that relationship. They're really driving that at scale communication. I think by doing it this way, they also create a little bit of an obligation to keep doing it. But you can see here, they're having fun, right? And this is definitely that level 3, right? So this is that level 3 aspect where they're driving a lot more attention, a lot more consistency, a lot more share of voice, a lot more share of mind, and therefore share of wallet, right? So these are the 3, right? So we've got use your webinar, do your financial year results. I'm not saying Airtasker and Cogstate aren't going to do the future levels, but this is examples of them. But do that really, really well and make sure it gets to people and you get that reach, right? How do you get that same message that works one-on-one out there? How do you then take that next step where you've got consistent questions that get asked? How do you answer those again at scale? And you're still getting that sort of ASX reach. And then you've got the next level, which is how do we actually upskill and educate people and be seen as the market experts in that? With this consistency, you're not going to get the ASX reach, at least not for everyone, but you can bring it back, especially as you're talking about key aspects. So level 1, 2, 3, great ways to unlock and really add that scale. And super keen, if you're still listening now, what else do you think? What do you think about this, and what are you working on? Thank you.